So in this video, we're going to go over what I believe are the best controller and camera settings for F1 25. So the first thing we're going to start off with then is my camera settings. These are the camera settings I use in all the videos that I've posted so far, and I will tweak it eventually in the future if I think there's an advantage you can gain from changing it, but I think these are the best and the most comfortable settings I have. Obviously everyone's going to have their own opinion, and it's not always wise to listen to everything someone will tell you, but this is what I believe works for me, so give it a go and tell me what you think. So field of view, I have it on -17, so obviously this is how close in the car it is actually to where the position of the camera is for the TV pod offset. Obviously you can have TV pod flat, but it just doesn't give you the same sort of customization options as the TV pod offsets. And then we're gonna go down to the offset lateral. So this is where the position of the car is on the screen. So I have it on -10 because that is dead center. And then moving on to the offset horizontal, so how far back you actually are from where the car starts to the end. I have this all the way in, just so I can see as much as the track as possible. And then the offset vertical, so how low down or how high up you are. I have this on 2 because I think it's fairly balanced. You don't want to be too above the car, you want to be able to still see the steering wheel, so I have that on 2 there. And then angle, so the angle of the actual camera and where it's facing, so I have that all the way down. I think -20 is your best option there. And then moving on to near clip plane, this isn't going to matter too much in TV pod offset, so just leave that on 0. And then your mirror angle, that's obviously the position of the mirror. 0 puts the rear wing right in the center of show, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. And then probably the most important one is actually your camera shake. So you want camera shake on 0. This is because it can be quite distracting if you're going over bumps, etc. This will move the camera all over the place, so it can be quite distracting when you're driving. So I'd have that all the way in 0. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is calibration. So obviously straight away we'll start off with steering rate. So currently I have this set at 103. This is very much track dependent. So obviously right now I'm at Silverstone, so I need the car to be as smooth as possible when doing a maggots and beckets and tricky situations like that, because obviously you don't want it to be lower than 100, as the wheel become a lot more sensitive. So every little movement that you do is going to do 10% more of that movement, if that makes sense. So I have that set at 103. If I'm at a track that I need a lot more movement and it needs to be quicker, I'll go to Hungary and I'll then lower that maybe to 95 to 100. But you don't really want to go lower than 95 and above 105. Moving on to steering's dead zone. So I currently have that set at 3. So with steering dead zone, obviously it says at the bottom the amount of steering and movement needed to register any input. A large dead zone will mean there is a large amount of rotation needed before it's detected. So basically, in normal English, what that basically means is how long it takes until steering movement is registered. So how much I actually need to move the trigger, not the trigger, the thumbstick, before it actually moves or reflects that in-game. So if I have this higher up, this is going to add more of a delay on what happens when I move the trigger. If I have it all the way down, this is going to happen instantly. But obviously with controllers and with wear over time, you are going to start to notice that you might get a bit of stick drift. But if you just high that up, that should solve your problems there. Steering linearity. So obviously this adjusts the amount of difference in sensitivity between the center point and the remaining wheel rotation. So the best way I can describe this is, if I have 180 degrees of rotation available on the thumbstick, when I get to 90 degrees, the first 90 degrees is going to be smooth, very smooth of the steering that's happening in game. But then the 90 degrees at 180 degrees bite point means that it's going to start accelerating and the steering will become quite inconsistent. So I'm going to keep this at 0. Because I don't want it to change depending on how much input I'm actually putting into the game. And then moving on to steering saturation. So if I increase the steering saturation, that basically means how sensitive the actual thumbstick is going to be. So I can move it higher up, then basically as soon as I even slightly tap the wheel or the thumbstick, it's gonna completely turn straight away. I like to have it on 0 because you want to have full control of that. You want to be as smooth as possible. Being smooth is where you'll find pace on a controller, so I keep that on 0. And then throttle dead zone is all about bite point again. So if you have this higher up, then it's going to take more of a delay before it actually registers that you put any throttle input in. And then throttle linearity is the same again, where it has that bite point in the middle. So say if I go to 0 to 50% throttle, it's going to be as normal, but then 50 to 100 will go a lot faster, so the throttle will go straight away rather than having that smooth input. So I like to keep that on 0 as I don't want to lose the back end. Going to create a lot of oversteer. Throttle saturation, so obviously this adjusts the point at which the maximum accelerator pedal is considered to be at the maximum input. So again, if you start to lift this up, this basically just means it's going to be a lot harder to reach maximum throttle and also maximum speed. And in fact, if you do lift this up too much, you might even see that you're actually losing pace on the straight because you're not actually putting the maximum throttle application in as possible. Moving on to brake dead zone. So this is the amount of input that you need to put into the brake, same as the throttle, before the car is actually going to react or do the braking in-game that you're trying to do. I like to keep it on 0 again. I don't want the game to dictate how much I'm actually pressing my own trigger. I want to be fully in charge of that. And then brake linearity, so the amount of difference in sensitivity between the starting point and the remainder. So again, so all these linearities are all, when you do half brake, so 50%, it's going to be the same as normal as 0, but then 50 to 100 means that it's going to spike straight away, which is not what we want, especially if we're on no ABS. We don't want a sudden spike in brake pressure, and then obviously the car is going to rear lock. That's not what we want. Brake saturation, so I actually like to have this on 5, so this is just the point at what the brake pedal is considered to be the maximum input. So sometimes when you're going around a corner that it's just a slight dab the brakes or a slight lift, you don't want it to do a full half sort of brake. You just want that tiny little correction. I'm going to quickly show you my mapping. I think it's pretty much the default. Obviously I've seen a lot of people use different binds of multi-function display, so I'm actually going to look to try and use some of the buttons I can put on the back of the controller and then have these changed a little bit, just so using ERS etc is a little bit easier. So yeah, definitely look at trying to change your ERS to a primary button that you don't use. Obviously that'll make it a lot easier when doing hot laps etc on like league racing, when you need to use different sort of ERS tracks during your lap. Moving on to my controls, my vibration and my force feedback. So I'm going to move more into the vibration force feedback to start with. So vibration force feedback strength, I have that all the way on 150 as I am on a controller, and I think you want as much vibration as possible so you can accurately know where the grip is and where it's not. So I have that all the way set to 150. On track effects, so I see some people have this all the way up, however I like to have it on 40 because I think it still gives you enough scale of what the different surfaces and different compounds feel like when racing on the surface. But I think you want to have the force feedback strength as your primary target on where the grip is, so you don't want this on track effect overpowering it and making it quite distracting to actually drive on when you've got too much force going through the tyres. Rumble strip effects, I actually have them on 0. I've seen a lot of people do have some rumble strip effects on. I think on controller especially, I think this is really important to have it as low as possible, because when you're braking or when you're accelerating and using a bit of the exit curb, when you have rumble strip effects on, it sends big vibrations through the controller, and that can sometimes make you overcorrect. It can also make you move in the braking zone. For example, if you run no ABS and you're trying to trail brake, that can also lead to rear locking if you're getting distracted by the big vibrations going through your controller under braking. Off track effects, I have them on 30. Obviously a lot lower than last year's game, as the strength of losing grip when going off track on F125 is a lot stronger, so I recommend having that a little bit lower than last year. Pit stop effects, I just have that on 0, that's personal preference. I don't really need to feel the car when it's going on the pit track, so I just keep that at 0. Wheel damper, obviously that's the force, the strength going through the wheel, that's more for people who do use a wheel. Again, find it a little bit distracting, keep it on 0. And then maximum wheel rotation, that is for when you're using a wheel. So if you are using a wheel, I'd recommend using 340. I see the default I think is 400, and I think that's just a little bit too much, and it's going to be quite tough to move a wheel if you are using a racing wheel there. And finally, we have the generic controls. So adaptive triggers, I like to use the DualSense X controller, but I don't like to have any of these on because, especially in the lower speed corners, if you have this on Trong, it kind of makes you use 70-80% of your trigger straight away when you might not want to. And I just think it gives you full range of movement. I like to be fully in control when using the triggers on the throttle, on the brake, etc. And overtake mode, I'm not sure I've seen anyone use hold. I'd have to definitely test that out, but using hold I think makes it a little bit more difficult to come off overtake. And obviously if you try to use overtake when on a slow speed corner straight away, yeah, that's not going to have the best effect on your car, so keep that on toggle, and that should help you. And that is all my control settings, all my camera settings, and I hope this video was useful for you, and if it was, please like the video and subscribe. I'm going to try and get to 200 subscribers by the end of this month. We're growing really fast, and I appreciate all the support, and I know there's a lot of comments about what videos they want to see next, so I'm going to try my best to do so. But thank you for watching.